Hello and welcome to session 3, Clearing the Bottlenecks. I hope you all had a fantastic lunch. My name is Joanne Perry. I'm the editor of Automotive Logistics, and it's my pleasure to introduce the panel for session 3. We've got Bill Wappler, who is President and Chief Executive of Sogea. We have Dana McBrien, Associate Chief Advisor at Honda, and Doug Adams, General Manager at Toyota, and they are doing a joint presentation. The next speaker is Steve Martin, Vice President and General Manager, Automotive, Aerospace and Industrial Vertical at Ryder Supply Chain Solutions. Finally, we have a joint presentation from Ivan Hernandez, Director of NAFTA Transportation at Daimler Trucks North America. With him is Ricardo Salgado, Founder and Chief Executive of LoadSmart. So now I'd like to hand over to Bill for the first presentation.
Hi, thank you. Okay, everybody ready to go? First of all, hi. I'm really having a good time during the conference because I get to look out and see so many friends, and we're talking about something that I always dreamed about and never thought that it would exist. And today we have withheld the announcement. Today we're going to share it with you first. You probably noticed outside there were other cameras and a lot of interviews and things going on. Well, that's because these gentlemen led something that in my lifetime I never thought I would see. And I'm going to do something very brief, which I never do, which is to introduce them, give you some context about what's going on, why did it take place, and then I'm going to let them really fulfill the mission of introducing you to the new automotive data ecosystem that they created. So, let's see if we can't get this thing going. First of all, what's the vision? We talked before, and all of us have been together, and if you remember in Mexico, we talked about not only what the value of visibility is, but what's the cost of invisibility, right? We've talked about 4.0, we've talked about IoTT, what does that mean to us? So far today, we've heard a lot about the future visions of technology and how they're going to have a place in our automotive world. What we've always said was that for the supply chain, and our perspective has always been that everything that the folks next door are dreaming about won't happen unless you guys get it done. That's just basic production 101. If you can't get things there, nobody's going to build a thing. So really in our heart, it's always been the supply chain, where is it? And we believe it's operating at a level of efficiency that won't keep up with the standards of the world. It's inefficient and too costly. And there have been a lot of companies and a lot of people that have been working on solutions. And I hope before you leave today, you spend some time with some of the solution providers, because it's incredible the explosion that's happening within the tech world that's going to help us solve some of these solutions. But our vision has been pretty simple. And as I said, really it's when commercial becomes personal. And what does that mean to us? What that means to us is every day we order something from Amazon, and what happens? All of a sudden I get an email, got your order, then I can follow it through the supply chain. It was shipped from New Jersey, then I get an update, it's in Pittsburgh. I get an update, it's in Ohio. You're going to get it tomorrow before 2 p.m., right? It's the way we live our personal lives. Anybody live their supply chain life like that? No, we don't. And so how is it that we don't? And what does it take to really get that same kind of experience in our commercial lives and what we do every day? Why isn't it the same? And for us, we really broke it down into 3 common areas, and that is technology has never been available for you to do that. It's as simple as that. The technology framework wasn't there. Well, it exists there now, so you can kind of check that box. The next thing is, what does UPS or Federal Express have that the rest of us don't? One of those items is a common framework. They all use the same technology. right? All the folks that are delivering packages all use the same handhelds. They all act the same. They're all on the same servers. They're all on the same ERP. Everybody is working within a common framework. And lastly, it takes participation. Everybody has to do the same thing. Now, what we found, even though we have a really nice growth curve going on, and we've delivered an awful lot of sensor-based technology and sciences to solve some of these problems, it really was more point-specific, and the solution was very dramatic, but very detailed and very limited in scope. So that's when these gentlemen came along. And they created something that actually the conversation began with Dana at Automotive Logistics Global. And during the last couple of years, I've watched this be conceived and then communicated back and forth with the team. And then all of a sudden, through all of the conversation, we had Honda, Toyota, Nissan, FCA, GM, everybody's in the same room with the number of suppliers that they selected to represent the supplier cadre. And they created then, through mass collaboration, which is really what blows my mind. Who would have ever thought you could get that number of OEMs together in a room to solve a common problem? And so it really goes back to that one conversation in Detroit where Dana goes, and in the end, what we recognize is that we all do the same thing. And that really was the underpinnings of the automotive data ecosystem and what they created. It started with something very simple. The vision is we need a more visible, a more robust, a more meaningful commercial life, and it needs to duplicate our personal lives. And they embraced the technology, and then they created something. So now I get to get off the stage, and I hit my 5-minute mark, and turn it over to the guys that really did all of the work. So we have Dana McBrien, and we have his partner and cohort, Doug Adams from Toyota. If you will, gentlemen. Go get him. Excuse me.
Thanks, Bill. Am I live?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So I was asked to make sure that everybody was active and alive and alert after lunch. So I'm going to start with a couple questions. You already heard these questions this morning, but there's a different meaning behind them. How many OEMs do we have represented in here today? Quite a few. How many Tier 1 suppliers do we have represented in here? Good, a few. Of the OEMs, how many of you think that we have issues managing our returnable containers? Good, honest people. Of the tiers, how many people think that we have issues managing our returnables? So recognition of the problem is the first step to recovery. And that's really kind of why we're going through this process. Probably not a relationship that you would expect having Honda and Toyota presenting together. We figured it would probably blow a few people's minds that we're up here presenting together. But this is, as Bill mentioned, something a little, well, very different. So I'm going to go a little bit through the why we did this. And Doug is going to represent a little bit more of how we went through the process. But basically, we all came together because we all had a common problem. As you all recognized, we don't manage our returnable containers very well. We have differing levels of severity of problems, differing problems themselves, but it all comes down to not managing our returnables very well. So we started some conversation back in September of last year, and got a lot of participation. As Bill mentioned, Toyota and Nissan and GM, FCA, and Honda were all represented in there. But we also pulled in several tier ones, some large, some medium, mostly medium to large suppliers, because we wanted to get the input of the supply base. So they had a representation in the development of this. So as you can see, this is just a photo of one of our early meetings. We didn't spend a whole lot of time sitting around and talking. We did a lot of development at a board, as you'll see from what Doug's going to cover. I'm going to skip through some of the animation. But really what we were trying to get to is getting the right container at the right place, in the right quantity, in the right configuration, in good condition, that we could protect our parts being delivered from our suppliers, from our tier ones. So we looked at this as being one of the big problems in the auto industry. I don't think there would be any of us that have annual meetings with suppliers that this doesn't come up. There are very few venues that this doesn't come up as being one of the problems. We went through this process and we engaged AIAG. I guess I'll just say it, mainly to keep us out of jail. But they're also a good venue to write standards, publish best business practices. So we wanted to engage them early in the process. And they have been along this journey right along with us for most of the journey. So we all had to come to the table and basically, in some instances, bare our souls, because we were talking about our problems, but also be very careful about what we shared about each other's business. Nothing proprietary, nothing monetary, and AIAG was helpful in making sure we kept that solution. So we looked at basically creating a data ecosystem that we all basically had input into. So we know that we sometimes cause delays in production at our supply base. We cause repack, we cause use of expendable. If we can eliminate all those issues, we're going to be way ahead of the game. As I mentioned, we've pulled enough information together about each of our company's business. As you'll see in some of the drawings, that we left the proprietary things off the table, but we wanted to build a single solution. And that common baseline is basically for the tier ones in the room, twofold. One, so that we don't come to you with 5 different solutions that you have to do business 5 different ways. But also, we wanted to build a common solution that could be used by the tier ones. It was in this venue in Detroit that it came across very loud and clear from a lot of the tier ones saying, we don't have the wherewithal to do the things that you do. You know, EDI came up as an example. Why can't we ride along in your EDI solutions? Why can't we be a part of that? So essentially, we agreed to collaboratively work towards this. 5 OEMs, I believe there were 12 tier ones at any given time that had worked in this with us. We involved a couple of logistics service providers and, of course, AIAG. So I mentioned one of the things that we didn't want to do was tear our supply base apart. I'm going to touch on this in just one realm, and I don't know if this will work up here, but it's in the middle section, never mind, where we've got the tier ones represented. We didn't want the tier ones to have multiple solutions that they're working through, especially if they want to adopt this and go off and do their own thing. So we wanted to get to that common solution so that there were standards, or at least a best business practice document that everybody could operate from. So that's a little bit of the background of why we did this. Doug is going to go through some of the hows.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you, Dana. So I guess my job here today is to kind of tell you how we went about going through the process, identifying with the OEs, the tiers, the logistics supplier, and basically AIAG. So, go on to the next slide here. The foundation. We did it really simply. We actually used crayons, no, just kidding, markers and paper, basically. We drew the supply chain, starting from the supplier and mapping it all the way through the network, either to material handling warehouses, cross docks, all the way until it actually reached the OE itself. We identified the life cycle management of returnables and documented that both from the supply chain and the OE side to make sure that we captured every point in the supply chain of how we wanted to capture data and how we wanted to manage it at a very high level. We actually, like it's been mentioned, there were 5 of us together. Interesting, I think probably the thing that I learned the most out of this was really the input from the tiers. They really were adamant about wanting to use RFID, I think even more than we were, truthfully, and really pushing us to make sure that we were going to use that data to solve the problems that are in the supply chain. So I thought that was a pretty good challenge that the tiers gave us as well to walk away from this whole activity. And now that we have the data, eventually we'll be able to hold one another accountable for that problem solution for the supply chain. So we ended up at the end, after all of our paper drawings and things like that, with basically a system that we're going to be able to visualize packaging, both with parts and returnables in it, starting from the supplier using a common platform through this Agere software, that we are able to visualize that inventory going through the supply chain, both from the supply base and the OE individually. So we now have the data now to problem solve this habitual problem we've had forever about how to manage returnables. So a very good solution, we believe, and it's common too with the 5 OEs. But that's not all we did. So we defined the system, but we also defined how the system needed to operate for unique instances in our supply chain. So we actually used Legos to actually visualize abnormal handling of returnables, at multiple suppliers on the same trailer. So by doing that, we were able to very clearly understand how everybody operates in those kinds of situations and create basically the requirements that the system needed to support us with that type of transaction. So I think, all in all, I think that's how we tackled this, and I think Dana's going to kind of finish it up here with how we wrapped up the whole session.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, so Doug didn't touch on the joke within this slide. We all got paid to do this stuff. So it was kind of fun being able to play with Legos and still get paid. But you can see through that whole process that we tried to take a very simplistic approach. There was a lot of good dialogue amongst all the OEMs to try to build what the OEMs want to do, but the interesting part was from the input that was given by the tier ones. So what we came out with, if I can get it to, there we go. This is an eye test. The screen is not jumping. If you're seeing it jumping, then you have something wrong with your eyes. But what we've come out with is basically a diagram that's going, that we're really not touching on this so much. We're keeping this away from a discussion about the product and the final outcome, and a little bit about the process we went through. As Bill had alluded to, that he didn't think this was something that he would see in his lifetime. I mirror that thought. And after several of the meetings, they'll both attest to the fact that I said it's really a compliment to everybody in the room that you have 5 egos like the 5 OEMs coming into the same process, working well together and delivering a solution. And it's a testimony to all of the parties that participated from all 5 companies and the tier ones. But this will come out later as our final output as the AIAG best business practice, best business case. It's still being developed a little bit, but one thing I want to leave you with is this isn't the end of it. This is really just the first foundational piece to what can happen next. So I've had a couple questions about, well, if we build this and it's all the same, is it lost as a competitive advantage? It absolutely is not. How each of us use this process, where we've mapped all of the touch points, all of the data points, all of the physical points, how we operate in that environment is really what becomes the competitive advantage. There will likely be some that will adopt 100% of it. There will likely be some that will adopt a portion of it. But regardless of the adoption path, the outputs need to be the same. And that's the end of our presentation for now.
On top.
Thank you.
Thank you to Dana, Doug, and Bill. And next we have Steve Martin from Ryder.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to go briefly through a few slides to give you a perspective on some of the bottlenecks that we all are aware of and that we've been talking about for a number of years, the technology that we're using to address those kind of in the near term, and how they also apply to some of the foundational points that we've been talking about relative to laying down kind of this new digital supply chain. So just a real quick overview for those of you who are not familiar with Ryder. We're an 85-year-old company. Basically divided into three divisions. You have our fleet leasing and maintenance group that supports about 240,000 vehicles, a dedicated transportation team of about 8,000 drivers that work custom delivery for customers, and then a supply chain group that I represent that operates about 50 million square foot of warehouse space, as well as transportation management for a number of our customers. So from a footprint of supply chain, we touch every aspect that really creates an opportunity for us to understand these pain points and kind of the digital transformation from a lot of different angles. So not unfamiliar to anybody in this room, the challenges that we're all facing, driver shortage and capacity constraint, which I think has pretty much reached an acute standpoint coming into this year, and really don't see that abating anytime soon. So it is an issue that we're going to finally have to address, and address in a couple of different ways. Skilled labor and shortages, obviously to maintain trucks, but then also to do some of the sophisticated operations that we're talking about. This morning at breakfast, we were talking about the kind of the gap that's being created just in the digital transformation itself, and the type of folks and the type of skills that we're going to need to be able to apply to the new workforce. And then you can look across the rest of those. You get through packaging, network transportation, mode selection. And really the final point of challenge is how do you create this visibility across the supply chain, something that we can all act on. I think we have visibility in pockets, but how do you actually get to a point where you can act on it, you can feel confident about it? So let me just hit on a couple of things that we're doing currently, and then how they build into the future. If you think about in-cab technology, in the past, we used to have to put a manager inside a truck to really see what was going on from a driver's perspective. Now we have access through a company called Linux with onboard cameras that face in and out. We're able to actually be part of that workspace every moment that that driver is driving. That's enabled us to do two things and really focus on what is that driver experience from a training, coaching, and safety behavior standpoint, and then the safety aspect of it. How do we drive down safety risk in our operations and in the community that we operate in? So if you look just statistically at that one product alone, we've been able to reduce our what's called event situations by about 70%. We've reduced our near following or increased our following distance about 23%, and then increased or decreased our near misses by over 20%. So you've got an immediate situation where we're able to take operating costs down, improve safety performance, and improve driver retention that helps us meet one of those challenges. The second piece of technology is really a combination. We're calling it Rider Drive is the product, but it's a combination of addressing the ELD mandate and hours of service technology combined with trip management. So how do you create a paperless environment for the drivers? And this is something I think from an OEM standpoint, we've talked about how do you transfer data to the drivers in an electronic format? How do we reduce that stack of papers that they're carrying with them? This creates a different driver experience, and it creates an opportunity for us to retain drivers in a different way. From a warehouse distribution standpoint, really working across the spectrum of technology that's available today, really with a focus on creating efficient and flexible warehouse space that's still customer-centric. So you look at RoboPack from automating packaging, Upskill, which is the wearable technology. We're able to actually perform training and workforce instructions at the job site. We've seen an improvement in execution and efficiencies of over 20% in the facilities where we've deployed this. And then Fetch Robotics, using the type of technology for automated moving of material within a facility, or drone technology to actually perform inventory management inside the four walls. The pilot location where we've deployed this, we've seen an immediate 60% plus improvement in the efficiency of running inventory management. So again, you're creating a different dynamic for the folks inside the facility. You're changing their workspace and creating real value, real dollars that you can then deploy into the rest of our technology challenge. The last piece from a visibility standpoint, you have two pieces of software that I think everybody's familiar with. They've been around for a while, Appian and LlamaSoft, but creating a focus around a driver-friendly network. How do you use the tools? How do you work with our OEM and supplier partners to create routing and network models that are driver-friendly? This is going to be one of the areas we can all address immediately for the short-term benefit of improving driver retention, but allows us also long-term to create a kind of a data string along with the in-cab technology for kind of this future position of a digital footprint. Sperion, which is your onboard tracking of trailers, everybody's familiar with, and then boil that all up into a product rider share, where we're able to start to pull this data into a platform to see truly the end-to-end order life cycle of materials and orders moving through the system, whether it's through the four walls, the use of common carrier or dedicated transportation. So what does that mean? Where we've seen the benefit is immediately taking the savings, the efficiencies, the driver retention improvement, and applying those resource capacity lifts or economic lifts into really how do we manage the data? How do you create the type of situation that allows us together to create this digital transformation? And it really puts us in a position to start thinking about how do you confidently execute a leaner supply chain? How do you take days out of your inventory cycle and know that you're going to have that repetitiveness? How do you do real-time adjustments? How do you take advantage of maximizing your opportunities in a situation where you've laid out a network and you don't want to have changes? How do you effectively implement changes? And then really kind of leads to this nirvana in our industry of a shared network. It's in our daily lives with Uber and other aspects of Airbnb and things that we're involved in personally, but how do you bring it into the industry that we're in and create this type of shared network? Gentleman before me talked about the shared network with kind of the sharing of opportunities with packaging. There is an opportunity from a commercial truck standpoint of how we create this shared model. You're going to hear a little bit more about it this afternoon from a colleague with a product called Coop. If you've stopped by outside, it's first of its kind and being piloted here in Atlanta about how we create a platform for businesses that are leasing and renting vehicles to share that asset when it's idle with somebody that needs a rental and lease versus coming back through Ryder, through a commercial desk. They're able to have that peer-to-peer interaction through software and mobile technology that Ryder's providing. That same step, when we get into networks, when you look at ridershare, how do you create the type of ecosystem that allows us to share freight, work within networks across customers, continue to keep your transparency of networks that are confidential and that are your proprietary activity, separate from others, but also create that opportunity to really maximize the asset. So we're getting there. Each one of these technology pieces is helping us address a daily problem today, but we feel very confident it's building that digital foundation. So that's all I have.
Next, I would like to invite Ivan to give his presentation.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Ivan Hernandez. I'm the Director of Transportation Procurement for Daimler in North America, going from the trucks, as you heard this morning from Jay Johnson, also passenger cars and buses. I'm here today probably going to disappoint you a little bit because I don't have the same accent as Joanna, but I will try to do my best, okay? So just try to follow me. So I was asked to share the story of partnership and collaboration that we have had with LoadSmart. LoadSmart is a startup company, and Ricardo is going to be sharing a little bit more information about what they do. But I will tell you about how we collaborate with them. About a year ago, our CEO, Roger Nielsen, he came to me and to the director of business development, and he gave us a challenge. Yeah? And the challenge was to increase the participation of our customers in the movement of spot loads, right? So that was the challenge. So as you can imagine, a corporation as large as Daimler, for us it's always or sometimes difficult to find quick solutions to problems. This morning we were hearing how difficult it is to implement IT solutions, right? I bet you that many of you, if you have an IT solution that is required today, if you go to your IT department, the answer is going to be, let me check if we plan for them. Yeah? Oh, we don't have the money in our budget. And if they have the money, then they tell you, okay, what are your requirements? Yeah? And then they tell you, oh, it's going to take six months, right? So our let's see. It's not changing. Okay. So our CEO posed the challenge. And what was the challenge? Increase our customer participation. As you know, Daimler Trucks North America is the largest truck manufacturer in North America. And as such, we like that our customers, who are also our carriers, we like that they manage our freight. So what we found out is that for this spot market, only 50% of the time our customers were managing that freight. So our challenge was, how can we increase that participation? And we also wanted to increase that participation by speeding up the process. Now, normally when you are trying to secure a spot load, it takes sometimes between 2 to 8 hours. Yeah? On average, it was taking us 5 hours to secure the load. So we wanted to decrease that. And we wanted to kind of improve the process along the way. On top of that, our CEO said, hey, you should be able to do it in under 100 days, and you don't have money to do it. Yeah? So what do you do with those type of things, right? So we couldn't look internally because we knew it was going to take some resources. So we work with our business development team, who is in charge. So that team is in charge of working with the startups, looking for new technologies, what's going on in the market. And we kind of sat together and started brainstorming. And they suggested, hey, I have been working with this company called LoadSmart, and they have a solution that is similar to what you are looking for, right? So we kind of got together, yeah, and let me just show you. They have that group in Daimler that has a very structured process to scout for startups and new technologies. So we basically follow that process. And so we got together with Ricardo. We went to visit him in his office in New York to try to understand what their business model is all about, to try to understand how can we apply and bring that to our needs for DTNA. And we were very pleased. So what we liked from LoadSmart, from the business side, was the ability to have instant booking for those spot loads, the ability to track, the ability to customize that tool to the Daimler Truck's needs, and the chance, this is the most important for me, the chance to match freight, because it opens the possibility to the reduction of empty miles that the people that are here that work in transportation, we all know that is an illness that we have in our industry. Yeah? A lot of the trucks on the roads are moving empty. So that opened the possibility for that. On top of that, we also like some cultural elements that were discussed this morning. Yeah? And those elements are the agility. Yeah? They are, all of them, I think they are in their early 20s. Yeah? So when we were there, it's like, oh, this is kind of a college room, right? So, but they are very agile because of that. Yeah, they are very engaged. They are always kind of having these fresh ideas and, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we try that? They have this position to help and to be flexible to what we were discussing. They brought up ideas to the table, and they had this very young entrepreneurial spirit. So we as a corporation, we also had the intention and the desire to bring some of these qualities into our own organization. As Jay mentioned this morning, yeah? Finding talent is difficult, but sometimes we have the talent in our organizations, and that talent needs to be inspired. And I think working with this startup is a good way to inspire and to show, hey, this is how a startup does things. Look at how quickly things can be done. An IT solution doesn't require 6 months. We did it under 80 days. Yeah? So it was very refreshing. So and then obviously the result, we developed our carrier spot load platform that we are still ramping up. We started with, we invited 31 customers, and we want to add more, right? We want to add more so that our customers have the chance to handle that spot load. Also, through those discussions, many new ideas came out of challenges that we were facing as we were implementing. Ideas of developing a trailer-to-go model, ideas to matching lanes that we are continuing to work, and the collaboration, right? And not only, I think, with Ricardo, we always talk about collaborating, but also now we want to collaborate with other industries and other OEMs, yeah, and other companies that move some other freight. Because remember, for me, the key is try to reduce these empty miles. Some of the results, as I mentioned, we reduced the time to secure the load, yeah, from 5 hours to, I think, 18 minutes is the average. And we increased, as of April, the participation of our customers moving these loads is 68%. That is a very good figure because we know capacity right now, trucking capacity is very tight. So it's a very good metric. And as of last week, we were around 75. So we're very pleased with that. And here are just a couple of slides of how our application looks like. And I will hand it over to Ricardo. Ricardo is going to tell you a little bit more about what LoadSmart does and how are we trying to match this freight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. Appreciate it. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me, and thanks for those kind words, Ivan. Before I go deep, I think this commonality that we're hearing across the panel is all sharing and data, and I think that's something that we haven't seen probably like 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, to be honest, is that people are starting to be more open to sharing this data as we see more benefits. And we see it on our platform. We have multiple shippers today that, to be frank, would have never shared their data amongst themselves, but they're starting to share it with us as they see some underlying benefits. I think Steve talked a little bit about like the shared economy. He mentioned Airbnb. Out of curiosity, how many people here in this audience have been on an Airbnb? Can you raise your hand? Okay, that's a lot. If I used to ask that question 6 months ago, and I would get half of the amount of people that are here. And what we're seeing is that we're more open to sharing, but there's the adoption of that platform. Because as much as we can talk over here about technology and engineering and data science and big data, AI, and how we apply it, we see that the adoption is as important. Now, let me ask you one final question to the audience. How many of you have been a host on an Airbnb? Nobody. Okay, so but you'll start seeing a little bit that, who wants to share their bed with a stranger, right? But some people do that, actually, except most of you stay in one of those, actually. So keep that in mind, and you'll see that the adoption of these platforms is going greater and greater. So let me go deep, or not deep, but fast, into who we are. So at our core, we're a logistics technology company obsessed with automating the full truckload shipment cycle. 50%, and we operate as a digital freight broker under this umbrella. 50% of our staff are engineers and data scientists. We were talking about talent a second ago. Our head of data science is he's not 25, he's closer to 35, but he's a PhD of Caltech, and he won the silver medal in the Math Olympics 15 years ago, to put it into perspective. And our ability to develop that type of, we have people from MIT, we've had a lot of people from Georgia Tech. Actually, I'm a Georgia Tech undergrad, so I'm a little bit biased on this, but retaining and recruiting that type of talent is something that is very important, that allows us to do this. Now, how we do it is by efficiently connecting shippers and carriers. It's a data problem. It's a data aggregation and adoption problem. And as you're able to do that, and your engineers are able to sanitize the data and delight your customer, we're able to provide that instant pricing and booking capability nationwide. So everybody here talks about like we have shortage of drivers and capacity and all these things. Well, we solve that via technology where with one click you just say New York, Atlanta, and you get a price immediately, and it's bookable. This is our mobile device. You can do it on the mobile. When we did it with Daimler, we first start on the web, which is something like you see over here. It's not that dissimilar how you book a flight on Orbitz or Kayak. So think about going from Atlanta to Miami. I click a button and I get a price. It's very similar over here. We started like that with all of our customers. And as we get more comfortable, what usually happens is it's fine if you want to book 1 or 2 shipments on a web portal. But if you want to book 1,000, that you can't. Imagine you booking 1,000 flights on Orbitz or Kayak. You would go crazy. It's not scalable, right? So at that point in time, when you're larger, you obviously have a TMS integration, which is what we've done. And effectively, that TMS talks to our server, gets a price immediately, programmatically in seconds, and then that observer or that load planner resides in that TMS and then observes it. Now, even more advanced, when you continue, is you're able to actually remove that person by creating some, inserting some engineering and AI there to remove that human where the server to server make that decision on their own. And that gets you to that 1 minute type of full process flow, full journey. Now, specifically on Daimler, like Ivan mentioned, we literally went from 5 hours to 18 minutes of that procurement of that spot shipment. And the reason that we can do that is because that resides on top of that instant pricing and booking capability for all lanes in the United States. And once again, we increased that usage that Ivan was mentioning from that 50 to that 75%. That's really important to us in order to reward those underlying motor carriers. And lastly, that customized one-click digital acceptance, similar to Amazon, where you say one-click booking. Like imagine that on the business-to-business side, but instead of moving like one book or a $30 order, you're actually putting $80,000, $250,000 worth of cargo, and with one click, you accept it. Something on Daimler that I'll mention, in order for these partnerships to work, you need the right partner on the other side. You need to invest in it. It's not free. What you put into it is what you get out of it, meaning that if you just treat it as a vendor, you're not going to get the most out of it. But if you iterate every week, you improve. And with that, I mean, we didn't get to 5 hours to 18 hours to 18 minutes in 1 week. We didn't get that in 2 weeks. Like, that was iterative, and through a process, we went from 5 hours to 3 hours to 2 hours, and we get to 18 minutes. And now we're actually faster than that. And when you have the right partner that is tech forward, that is open and willing to share that data and push the organization, because these are organizations that don't have 1,000 or 2,000 people. These are organizations with hundreds of thousands of people. I know that Daimler has 278,000 employees. So in order to get that through the organization, it takes time, and you need that willingness. So you need to iterate quickly, and that allowed us to accomplish that goal. And it was a challenge. It's great. Here's in 100 days you have to do it, and we did it in 80 days, and we're proud of our ability to do that. But it's really key to get the right partner on the other side. We do have some clients that I won't mention that are just not like that and do not have that tech forward mentality, and that's fine, but we're not that close to what their problem is, because they don't want to iterate through that, so we can't have that impact like the ones that do share that data with us. Lastly, I'm just going to mention on network layering, and specifically on network layering is an additional benefit when similar to what we're talking over here, it's just sharing the data. So we sit in between shippers and motor carriers. More of them feel comfortable with sharing that underlying data. Here you have an example of 3 different shippers where you can start triangulating, because no shipper does the same lane for obvious reasons. But as you overlay all this data, then you can optimize these routes, and then you can rebalance that underlying network. Currently, no motor carrier has more visibility on more than 1% of the total Class 8 trucks out there. But if you're able to aggregate all this data and overlay these networks, then you can rebalance that network, and it becomes more efficient for absolutely everybody. Now, the challenge is that unlike on the OEM side, where it's concentrated, right? You have 5, 10 of them that will control most of the market. On the motor carrier side specifically, it's exceptionally fragmented, right? 90% of all motor carriers have 6 trucks or less. And on the shipper side, it's also very fragmented. So let me just close with some visualization of what network layering means. This is one shipper that is really based in Tennessee, and you can see these are the shipments that we've done for them very, very recently. And then you see another shipper that is out in Colorado, and you don't see a lot of triangulation. I mean, some limited one, but then you overlay shipper B, and now you start seeing some triangulation between North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee. And then you have another one, and okay, you start seeing a little bit. And these are small and medium sized. We're not talking about the enterprise guys. And then you have one that is bi-coastal going, California to New Jersey in the Northeast. And then you start getting the enterprise, and then you keep on going, and then you keep on going, and that's what you have. When you have that, the biggest challenge, once again, is a data aggregation problem, that not everybody's sharing all that data or feel comfortable with that data, and you have large organizations that they have too much layers to provide that. But I'm here to encourage you to do that, because once you do that, you get these network effects, and you will find that, or make it easier for us to aggregate that and give you that underlying capacity. And this is what powers our instant pricing and capability today. You don't even have to sign up. You go to loadsmart.com, New York, Atlanta, and you'll get a price at that point in time. With that, let me turn it back over to Joe. Oh, I'll keep going.
So we just heard about a lot of interesting technology and some interesting projects, and I think there must be some questions from the audience. So who wants to get in early with their question? If you just put up your hand and somebody will come with a microphone and state your name and the company and ask your question, or just make a comment. Any questions? Okay. I'll get started, and then maybe that will prompt some more conversation. So I'll start with a question for Ivan. You said that the time to secure the load decreased by 94%. That seems immense. Were you surprised by that figure?
Well, no, because the process changed at the core, right? So we were, the process that we had was a bid, where a carrier would submit a price, then we will wait until another carrier submit another price, and then we wait a little bit more to see if somebody else would submit something better. And at the end of the day, you have to say, hey, I need to book it, so I give it to this one. So the process changed entirely because now they see, instead of seeing a load that is from point A to point B, and can you do it and what price you give me, now what the carriers see is I have a load from point A to point B and it pays X amount of dollars. So the carrier now just have to decide whether they take it or not.
And another question about the project with LoadSmart. You mentioned LoadSmart's startup spirit. And how much would you say their corporate culture has influenced your team at Daimler?
A lot. I think I've been with the company for 15 years, and I think the company in the last, especially the last 5 years, we have had a cultural change, and it really drives the results and the improvements. If you watch what Daimler Trucks, North America in particular, have been doing in North America, the results have been the best results that the corporation has had in North America in the history. Also, that now that cultural change that is taking place in North America is now spreading to other regions of the corporation and is going to Germany, etc. So it has a huge impact.
So a question now for Ricardo. LoadSmart service can be customized according to the individual circumstances. Can you explain a bit more about how that is achieved? How can you customize it?
Yeah, absolutely. So each shipper and industry has very different pain points and issues. Some of them are will have a live. Some of them needs a shipment in 2 hours. Some of them might be a drop shipment. Networks are just very different, and the urgency of that is very different. We'll have some other clients in other industries where they're very tech forward and they were having an auction every day, but they knew about, and the auction is primarily to service like incident loads that they need same day or the next day, but they knew about these 7 days before. So 7 days before, we were aware of this, and then we did a dynamic routing tree where effectively we were able to give them pricing, spot capacity immediately 7 days before, so they didn't have to wait up to that auction. And if you're able to proactively go after that, then you're in 10 times better position versus letting it into that underlying auction. So they didn't want to be into that auction, and we were able to reduce that auction by around 40%. But I'll tell you that with enterprise customers, we do customize some of our underlying solution because you're addressing some of these underlying pain points. Some of them are similar, so it can sit on top of a foundation. What we have seen generically is that most of them thematically are having nationwide capacity issues, so it all sits on top of our instant pricing and booking capabilities. Now, what I will mention is you need the right person on the other side for that iterative process to be as efficient as possible. Because if you don't have the right team on the other side that is open and willing to adapt to that and to push the boundaries of innovation and test some of these things, because remember, human beings are creatures of old habits, right? So they're comfortable in their zone, and all of a sudden you're taking them out of their comfort zone, and that's something that is just not natural for a human being. But I think that in today's environment, if you're not listening to technology, if you're not understanding with all this data, and we live in a world where our broadband providers, we live in 4G, and look at what 5G is. It's defying the gravity of Moore's law that states that we double every 2 years, and we have to take advantage of this. And I'm encouraged because I'm starting to see that the OEMs, like all these big corporations, are taking advantage of these things, and then that leaves space for us to have that underlying impact. And so we're proud of what we've done with Daimler, but it's as much them as us to be able to iterate and provide those results.
I think a comment on that is, how many of you have tried to implement a solution or a new process, and the people on the other side say, hey, yes, great idea, but not now, because I'm too busy, right? Or not now because now we are in ramp-up mode, and I don't want to screw up things. But right now is the real question is, if it's not now, then it's when, right? And then you have to have a culture that is willing to challenge each other within the departments that way, to have that healthy dialogue, healthy conflict, healthy tension, to be able to kind of have that change and that speed of change that is required right now. Otherwise, you will be doing the same. And next year, you will be saying exactly the same, because next year you will have a new product that is being introduced. Yeah, so you will be in the same boat. So that is very important.
Any comments or questions on that? Okay, gentleman at the front.
Sorry, the lights must be too bright. It's not a gentleman, it's me. It's Louis from Automotive Logistics. A question to Bill and/or Dana. You kind of skipped past, we started off a conversation and then loads of car makers were working together. What was the step that got car makers working together? Because it kind of just been, hey, I've got a great idea, why don't you all meet up? I get the impression it's a little bit more complicated than that. What were the different attributes? Was it, the right personalities in the right companies at the right time? Was it the solution? Was it something that linked them all? So that's my kind of question. You kind of went from, we got loads of people working together. What was that step or those steps?
Well, that's a great question, because as I've said before so many times, it's like a shooting star. It only comes across ever so often. And all of the attributes that you raised were true. It took the right people, it took the right time, it took recognition of a very large and common problem. It took the technology that was able to answer what they were looking for. But one of the things that we really didn't talk about that was a driver is when they found out everybody was doing the same thing already anyway. So, it was almost like a user community coming together going, oh, you're doing that too? And once there was a recognition that everyone was on the same road trying to go to the same place, and that the real balancing act was to make sure that all of their tier suppliers didn't have to do unique processes when they were accomplishing the same thing for all of their OEM clients, then it was a fairly easy undertaking. It really took that one day where everyone kind of had the light bulb go off and they said, well, he's already started it. He's launching FCA's in launch, and we're all trying to do it at the same time. Of course, you're going to come together. The massive collaboration was the surprise. Doug mentioned it, but the real surprise was seeing everyone around a whiteboard that this gentleman was driving, talking about how they're going to solve their own problems under a massive collaboration umbrella. You just never see that. Never. And that actually was very surprising to us. And now that it's being transferred to AIAG, and fundamentally now there will be specifications built around all of the processes and things that they created, then now it's a matter of really deploying, and the architecture is done.
Yeah, if I can add just a little bit to that, the aha moment was when we all figured out that we were doing the same thing, as Bill mentioned. Yeah. What kept the team together and kept the momentum was centered around when we all stood around the drawing board, and Doug was documenting the whole process, and the amount of agreement to the approach and to what was expected and what was, not that everybody agreed to everything that was brought up as an idea or a concept, but there was a lot of agreement in how we were going to approach it as a collective unit. And I think that kind of kept the cohesion, because we realized that we're not in a unique situation from a problem perspective, and we really weren't far off from a solution perspective. And of course, the tier ones kind of kept us in check because there was some really good input from the tier ones that, as I think Bill mentioned, that the tier ones were actually more aggressive about this than we were. Yeah. They want to go. They want to see this fixed. And they want to be able to apply that into their supply chain. So I think just the intrigue of we've all got the same problem. We've got someone stuck in the middle that we don't want to harm. But then understanding that the solutions that we're all trying to dig for were very, very similar.
Do you think that we need more collaborations to tackle the problems that the industry is facing? It's a slightly different question about whether the collaborations will happen. Do we need more collaboration?
Well, from my perspective, I certainly hope so. I think we've seen a lot of really good activity come out of this this first go-round. But we've got some pretty big things facing us. And we've already talked about the shortage of talent. We've talked about the shortage of drivers. If we all go off on our own tangents, we stand to tear the industry apart, quite honestly. And that was one of the comments that I made, I think, at the first meeting, to be a little rough. But this is a pretty big thing. It's a pretty big thing for the industry. We all understand that. And I, for one, was standing there saying, I don't want to be the one whose name is associated with screwing it up. And we all should take that approach. It is a good thing, but how many things have you seen, how many ideas have you seen come up that were potentially too new for the time, or good ideas that went by the wayside because of poor execution? So we really kind of focused on doing it right and not having poor execution of this as 5 independent OEMs and all the tier ones who kept us in check.
Can I add to that? I think there's, as a logistics service provider and sitting across supply chains, looking at it not only as a provider of service, but then the service itself of managing transportation providers and working with the OEMs. What I've seen over time is we have this pendulum swing, and it depends on who's in power at the time. The OEMs and its pricing pushed down to the carriers, or now it's the carriers and it's this capacity constraint. The collaboration, and it's happening in pockets, but the industry really coming together to understand how to create, a driver experience that's different or a driver-friendly model, or collaborating across our networks so that we can join networks that are overlapping to make it a more efficient model for everyone in the ecosystem. I think that's the next real big step. And we've tackled it in segments when we think about packaging and returnable containers, and we do it within our own company. But how do you start doing it across? And that really is that step into that shared model. So I would encourage us to not let go of that. It's difficult. I think, as you said, I personally don't want somebody sleeping in my bed. But how do you open up your business to where people can share in a different way? I think commercially, service-wise, it's going to be a benefit to us all.
Well, and if I may add just maybe one more comment to that. In doing this, we get to all the sexy words, right? We've all sat now through presentations about predictive dynamics, right? Machine learning, data analytics, all the sexy stuff we want to get to. It all starts with good data, lots of good data. So all of the folks on this stage, if you think about it, all of the business constructs that they've been sharing with you today are based on the ability to get a lot of good predictive data. Once you have that, then it self-energizes and you start to think, wait a minute, I can do machine learning. It's going to not only predict for me, it's going to proactively tell me how to manage my supply chain, right? It's going to remove that condition of unsurety that we live in. Supply chain people are incredible heroes. Every day they come to work and there's something a little wobbly and they jump into the breach and they solve the problem, right? We see it day after day after day. Well, if you have the right machine learning and the right tool set that is built on top of all of this incredible data capture that we're talking about, then it takes that heroic to another level. It really, what you do is you end up having a predictive supply chain that now we get to incorporate all of, again, the sexy technology that we've all been dreaming about in all of these meetings that we've been having here. And it's gonna, everything that we're dreaming about is going to happen. And a lot of it is built upon the framework that these guys are now building collaboratively, because they're collaboratively also building data, right? It's not just Honda data, it's Honda data and all of their suppliers. It's in concert with Toyota and FCA and Nissan and on and on. Think of the value of that data as it's then synthesized, reconstructed, fed back to them, and it's saying, we've seen this over and over and over, you might want to think about doing this. And today, what do? We have a crowd of people that jump into the breach. So if you ask me what all of this really represents, the collaboration represents the only way that you can get to a secure environment where all of the things we dream about are going to come true. And it will. But it's collaboration that drives that.
Considering the way that we're going in terms of more digitalization, more software, more systems, how much of a concern is cybersecurity and hacking? That's a question for anybody who wants to answer, including the OEMs. Do you worry about cybersecurity?
Of course. I'll take that. I think that obviously it's something that is super important, and we need to be obsessed about it. And it's scalable, which can be very worrisome. So you've seen some of hackers hack into vehicles, and as we move into a self-driving vehicle at some point in time, that can be obviously very, very, very dangerous. So I'm optimistic of having the right people on our side, creating the right frameworks for the right networks in order to do these things. I mean, it's as simple as when you think about how they hack, your computer and how some of those networks reside in some of those vulnerabilities. But even anytime we're doing, through our partnership as an example, and we're having Germany and Portland and New York, and anytime the systems that we use need to be approved within the whole systems dynamics to make sure that it's a secure line, ultimately. So I think that we're all thinking about it in the right direction, but the vulnerabilities are definitely there, and we need to continue to be obsessed about it. If not, people can take advantage of it, and we saw it. I don't want to get into the political dynamic, but we see the Cambridge Analytica and all these things of data, but it's something that we do need to obsess about.
For me, the hacking, I'm not an IT guy, so I'm not too concerned about the hacking. But there is an aspect that I think we neglect or that we bring too late into the game, and it's the legal aspect. When we talk about collaboration, the first thing that any person sitting here has to think about is, antitrust. Yeah. So if I'm going to be talking to Toyota, to Nissan, is that antitrust and legal aspect. So I think if we were to live in a society where it is not as litigious as the one that we live, we probably would see more collaboration. Because I think that is a roadblock, really. Yeah, because when you have an idea and you say, I could go and talk to these guys about this, but now I have to go and get a lawyer, and they need to talk to the lawyers of the partners, and then they need to understand the business and create a legal framework that allows to have that communication. That requires a lot of time. So I think that is, I wish, for me, I wish that we could have develop or have a better legal framework to collaborate.
Any questions from the floor or comments? Wow, it's quiet. I'm starting to get worried about you. It's such a good lunch that everybody is just digesting.
Post-lunch.
Okay, I want to ask Steve about some of the technology that Ryder has been implementing. I believe you're using drones for inventory management. I mean, I think that's very interesting. It sounds really futuristic. Can you tell us a bit more about that? For example, where are you deploying the drones? Is that across the company, or is it one or two facilities which are like a kind of test environment?
Yeah, so we started with one location that had some pretty fixed layouts, good level design palettes to where you could have that read just to begin testing the technology. And this isn't the drone that I would own, or probably anybody in this room would own and play around with at your house. It's a pretty high-priced drone, but the ability for it to travel down the aisles, check inventory, check missing locations, communicate that back real time to someone in the office that can make the adjustments versus sending out two people on a scissor lift and cruising down the aisles and going up and down doing the checks is where we saw our 60+% efficiency. The next real step is how do you start to create the visual logic on understanding different levels and mixed palette configurations. So I think the technology, it's there. It's whether or not we can actually reach kind of the price point and making it effective in the facilities. But certainly for facilities that have larger, more standard palette configurations, it's proving itself to be an efficient model.
And with regard to the Lynx drive cam, I'm just wondering, what was the acceptance like among the drivers? Are they happy with that technology, or did they have some issues like privacy concerns? I mean, what's their feeling? Did you test it? Did you ask them?
Yeah, no, you know, the immediate effect when you talk about it is kind of the big brother, because you do have a camera facing the driver and you have one facing the public. I think the best step we took is that we brought drivers into the equation from the beginning, explained why we were doing it, what the benefit was, how it was going to impact them. And it's not a disciplinary tool, it's a coaching, training, and safety behavioral tool. And so drivers that have been driving for 30 years will recognize things that they're doing that are creating an unsafe environment. But now they have the ability to have that two-way dialogue with a manager who's been coached on coaching. And so the program works when we manage the reoccurrence frequency and the ability for the drivers to learn, as well as for the managers and their coaching effectiveness. So you're looking at it from both sides. Are we doing our job? And the exoneration factor. Drivers that would have an accident or would be sideswiped by a car in the middle of the night and there's no one there as a witness, at that point they're coming back and trying to explain why they've damaged, or there is a damage on a very expensive piece of equipment, or possibly damaging material for one of our customers. Now you have clear camera evidence that it wasn't their fault. So not only did it help them from a retention standpoint, it helps us on the wrongful litigation and liabilities that are out there in our society today. So it is a proven technology that all carriers are moving to. Just from an insurance standpoint, this was going back maybe about a year and a half, 2 years ago. Large insurers backing out of the commercial trucking space because of the liability and litigation factor. This technology is helping us offset a lot of that insurance cost as we go forward. So if you do have fleets and you're not using it, would highly recommend applying it and not get worried about Big Brother. The drivers do actually like it now from that standpoint.
If I may add a comment to that, and once again, I'm not, is this working? Yes. If I may add a comment to this, and once again, I'm not a user, but I think that something like this also draws something, brings to the table is awareness. And it's like and once again, I'm not representing Ryder, but any type of industry that I've seen where there's awareness that the user is being observed, and it's not supposed to be like, hey, we're watching you, but as you're observed via a dual rating system in Airbnb or in Uber, that person all of a sudden becomes incentivized to make sure, like, hey, sir, here's a glass of water, here's a candy, here's a magazine, while you're in that Uber driver because he wants that 5-star out of 5 rating. Something that I've seen that I had never seen, I remember going to doctors and waiting for an hour, and now, I get I'm there for less than 5-minute wait because they want that rating or that review back because they're aware that that can affect that visibility of other people seeing this. And obviously, this is something very, very different. But what I have seen is that if I am driving and somebody is observing, my behavior knows that somebody is watching, so I'm trying to put my best behavior. That's what I see on my side. This is more theoretical than what I've seen on the practical side, and I've seen it across multiple industries.
Just a question again on the interplay between human resources and technology. This is probably one for Steve. Do you see autonomous vehicles as a solution to the driver shortage at some point in the future?
I think we certainly are challenged as a company when I have 8,000 drivers and autonomous vehicles. How do you approach that message to your workforce? Because you're talking about something that will reduce that workforce. I don't think it's going to reduce the amount of drivers we need. You're still going to have that final mile custom delivery. It's going to change how they're doing the job. It is going to take what you see as the most severe pain point, long-haul trucking, over-the-road, irregular type trucking, and automate that to a degree, which will help. Trucking industry has the average oldest workforce of any industry. And then you think about the attraction of new drivers into the industry, and it's an imbalance equation. So that technology is, I think, needed as we move forward simply to offset what is going to be a growing kind of gap in the industry itself.
Okay, last chance for any questions. Okay, question at the back.
Yeah, Jay Johnson, Daimler Trucks. Is the packet or the container tracking open source now with it at AIAG so other people can use it?
Yes, the short answer to that is yes, it is. It's being the best business practice is being written as an open source document. It's being touted as an open source, absolutely.
As it should be, right? Everyone that's showing us technology in the hallway, there might be 10 or 12 other technologies that are being developed that we're unaware of. And the concept is easy. If you have it and it's great and it meets the certification process of the ecosystem, which is 99.9% verifiable accuracy, bring it all day long. The only thing that you can't have multiple open source opportunities in is that the heartbeat, if you will, or the nerve system of the ecosystem, it really needs to be controlled by one framework. Other than that, we had people that were in these meetings that Denso came, and we asked them to come specifically because they're not a client, but they need to be heard, right? And we have others that certainly will find their path, and it will be different than a lot of other paths. And I think that if we're all going to get to the best place, it has to be open source. It just has to be. So very early on in this, we moved it away from a users meeting to a architectural meeting of what should be in the future, and turned it into a open source opportunity very early on.
And I try to be very careful about calling it a standard that's going to be written by AIAG. It's not really going to be written as a standard. But there are several AIAG publications that are complementary. So a good example is the standard that dictates the structure of the tags. It's already been written. We're going to keep to that standard. I believe in total there are six standards that are complementary, but none of them state exactly what we're trying to get to with the best business case.
Okay, I think we need to start wrapping up the Q&A session, but before we actually finish, I think Louis would like to say a few words.
You need help.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of points on the session there. I think Ricardo was talking, I don't know if you were trying to say that your IT guy was quite old, but you said some of them are 25. I've even got one guy who's 35, you know, so I don't know. Being nearly 35 myself, I wasn't sure how to take that. And the other thing is, you know, this year we partnered with Automotive IT to make it more of an automotive IT thing. And what do we hear about the solution? It was done with Lego and pen and paper on a board. So I don't know if next year, instead of partnering with Automotive IT, we should partner with Sesame Street or someone like that. That's right. But really, I just wanted to say that, you know, for the rest of the day, we've got the think tanks this afternoon. For those of you who have never been to our conferences or have never joined a think tank, they're often voted the most popular sessions in the conferences. They're in small groups like this, where you can talk on specific subjects, a little bit more honestly, perhaps, because you're in small groups. So please join us after the coffee break for the think tanks on more information and updates and maybe more detail on the automotive data ecosystem with Sergey, Honda, and Toyota. Another one, kind of, you know, we kind of touched upon it earlier in this session, but one on sort of the Airbnb of logistics, which is being hosted by Ryder. End-to-end supply chains, which is hosted by Kinaxis, the impact of autonomous vehicles, which is hosted by Syncreon, after sales and service parts, which is hosted by Toyota, and development of the tier supplier base, which is hosted by Magna. So please come back into this room after the coffee break for the think tanks. I always find them hard to describe. The only thing I can say is, like, for the first minute, 2 minutes, everyone's wondering what the hell's going to happen, what the heck's going to happen. And at the end of the hour, my biggest problem is actually trying to get everyone to stop talking so we can close the think tanks. On your desks or on your tables in front of you, you'll see the evaluation forms. They're also available in the app. So if anyone's leaving early, then please complete the evaluation forms. Obviously, if you're here for the 2 days, complete them before you go, but the evaluation forms are very important to us, so please complete them. You'll also find on the tables kind of a little bit of a promo for an automotive supply chain and logistics report, which was done written by TI, Transport Intelligence in the UK, but it's a global report, and we're supporting them on that. So you'll see details on the cards on the table. And if you are crazy enough to miss one of the most popular sessions, the think tanks later on this afternoon, the buses for the gala dinner, which is hosted by Ryder, will be outside just by the reception desk. Those will be there from 5:30 to take us to the museum for the gala hosted dinner, for the Ryder hosted dinner. And after that, the coaches at 9 o'clock will be bring us back to the hotel, but via the Sergey hosted afterglow party. I mean, networking event. It's not a party, it's a very serious business networking event with loud music and cocktails and glasses and singing and so on. But it is strictly professionally business networking.
Right.
But apart from that, again, just to kind of reiterate, thank you very much to the panel for sharing some of the innovations that they're working on. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
So enjoy your coffee break, visit the sponsor stands, and see you back in the room at 4 o'clock. Thank you. Thanks, John.